Everything we had burned with you.
I should have known something was wrong when Vanessa started caring about her underwear again. Not wearing it, mind you, caring about it. The expensive lace stuff that used to drive me wild back when she actually let me see it. Now it disappeared into her purse like contraband, leaving her smooth and ready under those $1,000 business suits that made her look like she could buy and sell souls before lunch. "Don't wait up," she said, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror one last time. Her fingers smoothed down the black pencil skirt that hugged her hips like a second skin. The Hartwell Industries mixer could run late. I looked up from my laptop where I'd been reviewing investment portfolios that seemed increasingly pointless. "Another networking event? That's the third one this month." "That's what advancement looks like, David." Her voice carried that familiar edge of condescension, the one that made me feel like I was still the blue-collar kid from the wrong side of town instead of a self-made investor worth 7 figures. "Maybe if you networked more instead of hiding behind spreadsheets, you'd understand." She grabbed her purse, a sleek black thing that probably cost more than most people's rent, and headed for the door. The sound of her heels on our marble foyer echoed like bangs. "Your shoes look cheap," she added without turning around. The door slammed, leaving me alone in our perfectly appointed suburban palace. Through the window, I watched her slide into the passenger seat of a silver BMW I didn't recognize. The driver was just a shadow, but something about the way Vanessa settled into that seat, intimate, familiar, made my stomach clench. If this were a Stephen King novel, I thought, I'd be the guy who gets eaten by his own dog. Instead, I'm just getting screwed by my wife and her CEO. I'd always been good at reading people. It's what made me successful in investments, what helped me climb from construction worker to entrepreneur. But somehow, I'd missed the signs with my own wife. Or maybe I'd seen them and chosen to ignore them, hoping that the woman I'd married 8 years ago was still somewhere underneath all that ambition and designer armor. Our house felt different when she wasn't there, bigger somehow. The silence stretched through rooms that had been decorated by professionals to look like we actually lived in them instead of just existing between meetings and business trips. Everything was beige and chrome and carefully curated, like a museum exhibit titled "Successful Suburban Couple." I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon, the good stuff Vanessa bought for impressing clients, and settled back at my laptop. The Hartwell Industries stock had been climbing steadily for 6 months, ever since they'd started talking about a merger with Pacific Tech. Vanessa's company, Morrison Financial, was handling the due diligence. She'd been working late a lot since then. Working late, right. The laptop sat open on the coffee table, abandoned when she'd rushed off to get ready. She'd been typing something when I'd walked into the room, had closed it quickly with that guilty little smile that used to be charming. I shouldn't look. I knew I shouldn't look, but the password was Duchess, our golden retriever's name. The same password she'd used for everything for the past 3 years because she was too busy climbing corporate ladders to bother with security. The email was still open. My hands shook as I read. "Richard, looking forward to tonight's presentation. I've arranged for the usual attendees. Sarah and Michelle are particularly excited about the private session afterward. I'll make sure to dress appropriately for the occasion. VPS. Don't worry about my husband. He's too busy counting his pennies to notice anything." The reply, sent from Richard Hartwell's personal account, made my blood turn to ice water. Vanessa. Perfect. I've reserved the penthouse suite as discussed. Make sure the other ladies understand that discretion is part of their performance review. Your dedication to client relations hasn't gone unnoticed. The promotion we discussed will be finalized after the merger announcement. Bring those special party favors you mentioned. RPS. Your husband sounds like a lucky man. Too bad he doesn't know how to keep a woman like you satisfied. I read it 3 times before the words really sank in. Then I scrolled up through the message thread, watching months of my marriage dissolve into a carefully orchestrated business transaction. Photos, explicit messages, calendar invites for special presentations that coincided with every late night and weekend conference. My wife wasn't just cheating on me. She was running a high-end escort service for corporate advancement, and I was the clueless husband bankrolling the whole operation. The bourbon burned going down, but not as much as the realization that half my investment portfolio was tied up in Morrison Financial and Hartwell Industries. I'd been funding my own humiliation. I grabbed my keys and headed for the garage. The silver BMW was long gone, but I knew where they were going. The Grandview Hotel had been Vanessa's favorite spot for business dinners lately. 20 minutes across town, enough time to think about what I was doing. I should confront her directly. I should call a lawyer. I should be the mature, rational adult and handle this through proper channels. Instead, I borrowed my neighbor's beat-up Honda and drove across town like a man possessed. The Grandview's parking lot was full of expensive cars and expensive people. I found a spot with a clear view of the hotel's entrance and settled in to wait. The Honda's radio played classic rock while I nursed my anger and tried to figure out what the hell I was going to do with the rest of my life. At 11:30, they came out. Vanessa first, her hair mussed and her lipstick gone. She was laughing at something Richard Hartwell was whispering in her ear. He was everything I wasn't. Tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car. Behind them came two other women I recognized from Morrison Financial's website. Sarah Chen from accounting and Michelle Rodriguez from legal. All of them looked like they'd been thoroughly entertained. I had my phone out before I realized I was moving, snapping pictures through the Honda's windshield. The lighting wasn't great, but it was enough to see faces, enough to establish who was where and when. That's when the security guard noticed me. "Hey," he shouted, jogging across the parking lot with his hand on his radio. "What are you doing out here?" I started the engine, but he was faster than he looked. His meaty hand slammed against the driver's side window just as I threw the car into reverse. "I said, what are you doing out here, buddy?" "Just waiting for someone," I said through the cracked window. "Yeah? With a camera? You some kind of pervert?" The accusation hit like a slap. Here I was, the wronged husband, and I was the one being treated like a criminal. Meanwhile, my wife was probably already planning her next business meeting with Mr. Silverhair. "Look, I'm not causing any trouble. Get out of the car." "I don't think—" He tried the door handle. When it didn't open, he stepped back and spoke into his radio. "Yeah, I've got a suspicious person in the parking lot. Possible stalker situation." That's when I floored it. The Honda shot backward, tires squealing on asphalt. The security guard jumped aside, cursing loud enough to wake half the hotel. I spun the wheel, shifted into drive, and tore out of the parking lot like I was being chased by demons. Maybe I was. By the time I got home, my hands had stopped shaking. Vanessa's car was already in the driveway and the lights were on in our bedroom. I sat in the Honda for a long time, staring at our perfect suburban house and wondering how long I'd been living a lie. When I finally went inside, she was already in bed, pretending to be asleep. Her breathing was too controlled, too careful. Real sleep doesn't sound like that. I stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at the woman I'd thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. In the darkness, she almost looked like the girl I'd married, young and hopeful and full of dreams that didn't involve selling herself for corporate advancement. Then she shifted, and I caught a glimpse of fresh bruises on her neck. Hickeys. At 38 years old, my wife was coming home with hickeys from another man. I went downstairs and opened my laptop again. The emails were still there, along with calendar entries going back 6 months. A whole shadow life I'd never suspected, funded by money I'd earned and invested while she was busy earning her promotions the old-fashioned way. But there was something else. References to other companies, other mergers. This wasn't just about Hartwell Industries. This was bigger, much bigger. I poured another bourbon and started taking screenshots. The next morning, Vanessa made pancakes. She hadn't cooked breakfast in 2 years, but there she was at 7 a.m., humming some pop song while she flipped perfectly golden circles of batter. She'd put on the blue sundress I'd bought her for our anniversary, the one she'd claimed made her look frumpy and had never worn. "Good morning, honey," she said without turning around. I thought we could have a nice breakfast together before I head to the office. I sat at the kitchen island and watched her perform domesticity like she was auditioning for a role. The hickeys were covered with concealer, but I knew they were there. "How was the mixer?" I asked. "Oh, you know how these things are. Boring presentations, terrible wine, everyone trying to impress everyone else." She set a plate in front of me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm just glad to be home." The pancakes tasted like cardboard, but I ate them anyway. Vanessa chattered about weekend plans and grocery lists and all the mundane details of a marriage that was apparently just an elaborate performance. Every word felt like another nail in a coffin I hadn't realized I was building. After she left, no kiss goodbye, just a wave from the doorway, I called Tommy Brennan. Tommy and I had grown up 3 blocks apart, back when this neighborhood was all working-class families and corner bars instead of organic markets and yoga studios. He'd gone into the police force while I'd chased money, but we'd stayed close. Close enough that when he'd left the force to become a private investigator, I'd helped him get started with a small business loan. "Dave," he said when he answered, "please tell me you're calling because you want to invest in something fun instead of those boring tech stocks." "I need your help with something." The tone of my voice must have gotten through to him because he went serious immediately. "What kind of help?" "The kind that involves cameras and questionable ethics." There was a pause. Then, "Your place or mine?" Tommy's office was above a Chinese restaurant in the old part of town, the kind of place that still had character instead of corporate polish. The stairs creaked, the coffee was terrible, and the whole building smelled like kung pao chicken and broken dreams. But Tommy was good at what he did. Really good. I showed him the emails, the photos from the hotel, everything I'd found. He read through it all with the methodical attention of someone who'd seen every possible variation of human stupidity. "Jesus, Dave," he said finally. "How long has this been going on?" 6 months, maybe longer. I've been so buried in work that I missed all the signs. The signs were there. You just didn't want to see them." He leaned back in his chair, which squeaked like a dying mouse. "The question is, what do you want to do about it?" "I want to destroy them." The words came out harder than I'd intended, but Tommy didn't flinch. He'd heard worse. "Okay," he said. "But we do this smart. You want revenge? You play chess, not checkers. These people have money and lawyers and connections. If we're going to take them down, we need to be bulletproof." He opened a filing cabinet and pulled out a camera with a lens the size of a small telescope. "First, we get better evidence. Photos that'll hold up in court, recordings if we can manage it. Then we figure out exactly how deep this goes." "What do you mean?" "Your wife isn't stupid enough to risk her career for some middle-aged CEO's ego. There's money involved, or blackmail, or both. We need to find out who else is in on this and what they are really after." Tommy was right. Vanessa had always been calculating, but she wasn't reckless. If she was running this kind of operation, there had to be a bigger payoff than just a promotion. "There's something else," I said. "I think they're planning something with the merger announcement, some kind of stock manipulation." "Now you're talking my language." Tommy grinned, and for a moment he looked like the kid who used to help me steal apples from Mrs. Patterson's tree. "You know what we need?" "What?" "Bait." The plan was simple, which made it beautiful. Tommy had a friend, a gorgeous redhead named Lisa, who'd done some modeling before becoming a paralegal, who owed him a favor. She'd pose as my new girlfriend, someone I'd met through business connections, someone successful and confident, and everything Vanessa wasn't expecting. The Bentley was my idea. I'd been thinking about upgrading anyway, and a short-term lease was surprisingly affordable when you had 7 figures in investment accounts. Lisa loved it immediately. "This is going to be fun," she said, running her hand along the leather interior. "I haven't played the other woman in years." "Technically, you're not the other woman," I pointed out. "She is." "Even better." We hit Cafe Luna at exactly 11:30 on Saturday morning, right when Vanessa's weekly brunch with the girls was in full swing. I'd been hearing about these brunches for months, how important they were for networking, how much business got done over mimosas and avocado toast. What I hadn't known was that Richard Hartwell made regular appearances. He was holding court at a corner table when Lisa and I walked in, his silver hair catching the light like he was posing for a magazine cover. Vanessa sat to his right, laughing at something he'd whispered. Sarah and Michelle flanked them like bookends, along with 2 other women I didn't recognize. They looked like a board meeting disguised as a social gathering. Lisa squeezed my arm. "That's her? That's her? She's prettier than I expected." "She used to be beautiful," I said, and realized I meant it. We took a table across the room, close enough to be noticed, but far enough away to avoid immediate confrontation. Lisa ordered champagne, expensive champagne, and made a show of feeding me strawberries while she laughed at my jokes. It took exactly 7 minutes for Vanessa to notice us. I saw the moment she spotted me, watched her face go through a series of micro-expressions that would have been hilarious if they weren't so pathetic. Confusion, recognition, shock, and finally a kind of panicked calculation as she tried to figure out what I was doing there and who the redhead was. Richard noticed her reaction and followed her gaze. When he saw me, his expression shifted to something between amusement and annoyance, like I was a mildly interesting problem he'd have to solve later. That's when I made my move. I excused myself from Lisa, and walked over to their table, carrying the small gift bag I'd prepared. Vanessa's eyes went wide as I approached, and I could see her trying to figure out how to play this. "Hello, honey," I said, loud enough for the whole restaurant to hear. "Fancy running into you here." "David," she said, her voice tight with forced cheer. "What a surprise. I thought you were playing golf today." "Change of plans." I smiled at Richard, who was watching me with the kind of carnivory interest rich men reserve for potential threats. "You must be the famous Richard Hartwell. I've heard so much about you." "All good things, I hope," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm and cold, like shaking hands with a marble statue. "Oh, absolutely. Vanessa tells me you really know how to show a lady a good time." The words hung in the air like smoke. Vanessa's face went pale, but Richard just smiled wider. "Your wife is a very talented woman," he said. "We appreciate her dedication." "I'm sure you do." I turned back to Vanessa and held out the gift bag. "You forgot something at home this morning. I thought you might need it." She took the bag automatically, her hand shaking just slightly. When she looked inside, her face went from pale to green. It was the black lace underwear from her email, the special party favors she'd mentioned. I'd found them in her purse the night before, along with a few other interesting items. "You forgot these," I said, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "Maybe your boss will appreciate them." The silence that followed was beautiful. Vanessa stared into the bag like it contained a live snake, while Richard's smile finally cracked around the edges. The other women at the table looked between us like they were watching a tennis match played with hand grenades. Then Vanessa found her voice. "David, what the hell?" "Language, honey," I said. "We're in public." That's when she threw her mimosa in my face. The orange juice and champagne hit me like a cold slap, dripping down my shirt and onto the restaurant's polished floor. Conversations stopped. Cell phones came out. Someone laughed. I wiped my face with a cloth napkin and smiled. "Well," I said, "I guess that's one way to handle it." I walked back to Lisa, who was trying not to laugh behind her champagne glass. Behind me, I could hear Vanessa hissing something at Richard, who was speaking in low, urgent tones to someone on his phone. "How'd I do?" I asked Lisa. "Oscar-worthy," she said. "But I think we should leave before security shows up." She was right. The manager was already heading our way, looking like a man who'd rather be anywhere else. We left a $100 tip and walked out like we owned the place. The Bentley started with a purr that sounded like satisfaction. "Phase 1 complete," Lisa said as we pulled out of the parking lot. "Phase 1? Honey, that was just the opening act. Now the real fun begins." She was right. By the time we got back to Tommy's office, his phone was already ringing. The first call was from a reporter at the Business Journal who'd heard about some kind of incident at Cafe Luna involving Morrison Financial executives. The second call was from a Morrison Financial board member who'd been having lunch 3 tables away. The third call was from someone claiming to represent Richard Hartwell's legal team. Tommy grinned as he hung up. "Looks like you got their attention. What's next?" "Next, we let them make the first move. They're going to try to control the narrative. Maybe threaten you with maltreatment charges or a restraining order. That's when we hit them with the real evidence." He was right, of course. Vanessa came home that evening with fire in her eyes and a lawyer's business card in her hand. "What the hell was that about?" she demanded before I'd even closed the front door. What about? Don't play stupid with me, David. The restaurant, the underwear, that woman. Are you having some kind of breakdown? I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and saw a stranger wearing a familiar face. The woman I'd married would never have sold herself for a promotion. She would never have brought another man's bruises into our bed. "Maybe I am," I said. "Or maybe I'm finally seeing clearly. If you think you can embarrass me in public and get away with it, get away with what exactly? Returning your property? Making conversation with your boss?" Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She knew I knew, but she couldn't figure out how much I knew or what I planned to do about it. "David, if you're having problems, we should talk about them, like adults." "You're right," I said. "We should definitely talk about problems, like adults." I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshot of her email to Richard, the one about special party favors and private sessions. She went very still. "Where did you get that?" "Your laptop. Password's still Duchess, by the way. You might want to change that." For a moment, I thought she might try to deny it, come up with some explanation about how the emails were fake or taken out of context, but Vanessa had always been smarter than that. Instead, She went on the attack. You went through my private communications? That's a violation of my privacy, David. It's probably illegal. Probably, but not as illegal as securities fraud. That stopped her cold. I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes, trying to figure out how much I'd pieced together. I don't know what you think you found. I found enough. I put the phone away and headed for the stairs. I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight. Tomorrow we're going to have a very long conversation about the future. David, wait. But I was already gone, leaving her standing in our perfect foyer with her perfect lies falling apart around her. Upstairs, I opened my laptop and started making phone calls. The first was to my financial advisor, moving my assets out of anything connected to Morrison Financial or Hartwell Industries. The second was to Tommy. How do you feel about playing offense? I asked when he answered. I thought you'd never ask. The next morning, Vanessa was gone. Not just out for coffee gone, really gone. Her closet was half empty, her jewelry box cleaned out, and there was a note on the kitchen counter written in her careful handwriting. David, I'm staying at Sarah's while we figure this out. What you did yesterday was unforgivable, but I'm willing to discuss a civilized resolution. Call my lawyer. V. The lawyer's card was paper-clipped to the note. Marcus Webb, Esquire, Divorce and Family Law. His office was in the expensive part of downtown, the kind of place where they charge you $500 an hour to tell you why you're wrong. I called Tommy instead. She bolted, I told him. Expected. Probably went straight to Hartwell to figure out damage control. How do you feel about accelerating our timeline? What did you have in mind? Meet me at the office and bring your checkbook. Tommy's plan was beautiful in its simplicity. If Vanessa wanted to play lawyer games, we'd give her more legal problems than she could handle. But first, we needed to know exactly what we were dealing with. I've been digging into Morrison Financial, he said, spreading papers across his desk like a poker player revealing a winning hand. Your wife isn't just sleeping her way to the top. She's part of something bigger. The documents told a story that made my stomach turn. Morrison Financial had been hemorrhaging clients for 2 years, ever since a scandal involving misappropriated pension funds. They were desperate for a big score, something to restore investor confidence and keep the doors open. The Hartwell merger was that score, but it was built on insider information, stock manipulation, and a network of client relations specialists who traded Zex for business intelligence. How many women are involved? I asked. At least 6 that I can confirm, maybe more. They're all Morrison employees, all young and ambitious, all promise promotions in exchange for networking with potential clients. Jesus, it gets worse. I think Hartwell is planning to dump Morrison after the merger goes through. He gets their client list, their assets, and their talent, then leaves them holding the bag for any legal fallout. I stared at the papers, trying to process what I was reading. My wife wasn't just a cheater. She was a sufferer. A willing sufferer, maybe, but still someone being manipulated by men with more money and fewer scruples. For about 30 seconds, I felt sorry for her. Then I remembered the hickeys and the feeling passed. What's our move? I asked. We go nuclear, but first we need allies. The allies turned out to be easier to find than I'd expected. Tommy had been busy while I was processing my marital meltdown, reaching out to other husbands and boyfriends who'd been affected by Morrison Financial's client relations program. There were 4 of them, and they were all angrier than I was. Mike Torino was married to Sarah Chen, the accountant. He was a contractor, built like a brick wall, with hands that looked like they could crush walnuts. He'd found out about his wife's extracurricular activities when she'd come home with a Rolex she claimed was a performance bonus. Performance bonus, he said, his voice like gravel in a cement mixer. That's what she called it, a damn performance bonus. Then there was James Mitchell, Michelle Rodriguez's fiancé. He was younger than the rest of us, maybe 30, with the kind of nervous energy that comes from too much coffee and not enough sleep. He worked in IT, which made him useful for reasons that would become clear later. She was supposed to be working late on the Henderson account, he said, staring at his hands. Turns out the Henderson account was code for Richard Hartwell's hotel room. The third was Robert Kim, whose girlfriend Lisa Park worked in Morrison's marketing department. Robert was a pharmacist, quiet and methodical, but there was something in his eyes that suggested still waters running very deep. I want them to hurt, he said simply. All of them. The fourth was Tom Bradley, married to Jennifer Walsh from Morrison's HR department. Tom was a teacher, which meant he was used to dealing with children. Unfortunately, it also meant he was the most naive about what we were planning. "I just want my wife back," he said. "Maybe if we expose what's happening, she'll realize she's being used." Tommy and I exchanged a look. Tom was going to be a problem, but he was also useful. His wife worked in HR, which meant she had access to personnel files, employment records, and internal communications. If we could get to her computer, we could map the entire network. "Here's what we're going to do," Tommy said, spreading a map of downtown across his desk. "Morrison Financial is having their annual client appreciation dinner next Friday. All the major players will be there, including Hartwell and his cronies." He marked several locations with red X's. "We're going to hit them simultaneously. Multiple fronts, maximum chaos, no way to control the narrative." "What kind of hits?" Mike asked. "The legal kind," Tommy said quickly, probably noticing the way Mike's hands had clenched into fists. "We're going to expose them, not attack them." "Speak for yourself," Mike muttered, but he didn't argue. The plan was complex but elegant. James would handle the digital side, hacking into Morrison's servers to download personnel files and internal communications. Robert would use his pharmaceutical connections to get us access to the hotel where the dinner was being held. Mike would provide muscle if things went sideways. Tom would get us Jennifer's access codes, and I would be the distraction. "What kind of distraction?" I asked. Tommy grinned. "The kind that involves you, Lisa, and a very public confrontation with your loving wife." The week that followed was the longest of my life. Vanessa's lawyer sent threatening letters about maltreatment and invasion of privacy. Richard Hartwell's people made subtle inquiries about my business connections, the kind of fishing expedition that suggested they were looking for leverage. Meanwhile, Tommy and his team of wronged husbands worked around the clock to gather evidence. James turned out to be some kind of computer wizard, the type who could hack into a secure server using nothing but a smartphone and righteous indignation. "I'm in," he announced on Thursday evening, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "Jesus Christ, you guys need to see this." The files he'd downloaded painted a picture that was even worse than we'd imagined. Morrison Financial wasn't just using Zex to win clients. They were blackmailing them afterward, using compromising photos and recordings to extort favorable deals. Richard Hartwell wasn't the mastermind. He was just another sufferer, albeit one who decided to play along rather than fight back. The real power behind the operation was someone I'd never heard of. Patricia Vance, Morrison's chief operating officer. A woman who'd turned corporate networking into a sophisticated extortion racket. "She's been planning this for 3 years, James said, scrolling through email threads that read like a criminal conspiracy. "The merger with Hartwell is just the endgame. Once it goes through, she'll have enough dirt on half the business community to write her own ticket." "Where's my wife in all this?" I asked. James pulled up another file. "Vanessa was recruited 18 months ago. Patricia convinced her that sleeping with clients was just advanced networking, that all successful women did it. By the time your wife figured out what was really happening, she was in too deep to back out." I stared at Vanessa's personnel file, reading performance reviews that praised her client relations skills and willingness to go above and beyond. The woman I'd married had been turned into a corporate courtesan, and she'd been too ambitious to realize it until it was too late. For a moment, I felt that sympathy again. Then I remembered that she'd never tried to tell me what was happening, never asked for help, never given me the chance to stand by her. Instead, she'd made me complicit by using my money to fund her transformation. "What's the plan for tomorrow night?" I asked. Tommy smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "Tomorrow night, we burn it all down." The Morrison Financial Client Appreciation Dinner was held at the Grand View Hotel, the same place where I'd first caught Vanessa with Richard Hartwell. The irony wasn't lost on me. I arrived fashionably late, wearing my best suit and carrying a briefcase that contained enough evidence to destroy half the people in the room. Lisa was on my arm, stunning in a red dress that turned heads and stopped conversations. Vanessa was holding court near the bar, laughing at something Patricia Vance was saying. She looked beautiful and confident and completely oblivious to what was about to happen. Richard Hartwell spotted me first. I saw him lean over to whisper something in Patricia's ear, watched her eyes narrow as she located me across the room. Then the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in 30 seconds later, bathing the ballroom in an eerie red glow. People were murmuring, confused, but not yet panicked. The hotel staff was apologizing, explaining that it was just a temporary power issue. That's when the projectors came on. James had done his homework. The hotel's audiovisual system was connected to the same network as their business center, which meant that anyone with the right access codes could override the system remotely. The first image that appeared on the screens around the room was an email from Patricia Vance to Richard Hartwell discussing performance incentives for Morrison Financial employees. The second was a photograph of Vanessa leaving Hartwell's hotel room at 2 a.m. The third was a recording of Patricia explaining to a room full of female employees how client relations worked in the modern business world. The murmur of confusion turned into shouts of outrage. I saw Morrison's CEO, a gray-haired man named Douglas Morrison, staring at the screens with the expression of someone watching his life's work go up in flames. Patricia was screaming at hotel staff to shut off the projectors, but it was too late. Cell phones were out, recording everything. The local business reporter was taking notes as fast as he could write. And in the middle of it all, Vanessa was staring directly at me with a look of pure hatred. That's when the real fireworks started. "You son of a witch!" she screamed, pushing through the crowd toward me. "You did this!" "I have no idea what you're talking about," I said, loud enough for the reporters to hear. "I'm just here to support local business." She reached me just as another email appeared on screen, this one detailing how Morrison Financial employees were expected to entertain clients in exchange for favorable performance reviews. "You're destroying everything," she said, her voice breaking. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I've told the truth," I said. "Isn't that what marriage is supposed to be about?" That's when she slapped me. The sound echoed through the ballroom like a bang. Conversation stopped, cameras focused, and I just stood there feeling the sting on my cheek and the satisfaction of a plan perfectly executed. "Feel better?" I asked. She raised her hand to punch me again, but Patricia Vance grabbed her arm. "Don't!" Patricia hissed. "You're making it worse." But it was already too late. The damage was done, the evidence was public, and the story was out there for the world to see. Morrison Financial would be finished by morning. Richard Hartwell would spend the next decade fighting federal charges. And Patricia Vance would discover that running a criminal conspiracy was a lot easier than covering one up. As for my wife, she was staring at me like I was a stranger, which, I realized, was exactly what I'd become. "I hope it was worth it," she said. "Every penny," I replied. Then I took Lisa's arm and walked out of the ballroom, leaving my marriage and my old life behind in the ruins of Morrison Financial's client appreciation dinner. Outside, Tommy was waiting with a bottle of champagne and a grin that could have powered the hotel. "How'd it go?" he asked. "Like clockwork," I said. "Good, because that was just the opening act." "What do you mean?" He handed me a legal document that made my heart race. "Restraining order, filed this afternoon by your wife's lawyer. Claims you've been stalking and maltreating her." I stared at the papers, feeling the satisfaction of victory curdling into something uglier. "She's trying to control the narrative," Tommy continued. "Make you look like the unstable ex-husband while she plays the sufferer." "What do we do?" Tommy's grin got wider. "We play offense." The restraining order was just the beginning. By Monday morning, Vanessa's lawyer had filed for an emergency divorce, claiming I was mentally unstable and potentially dangerous. He'd frozen our joint accounts, put a hold on the house, and somehow convinced a judge that I was a threat to my wife's safety. I found out about it when I tried to buy coffee and my credit card was declined. "Clever," Tommy said when I called him from a payphone outside the coffee shop. "She's trying to cut off your resources while she figures out how to salvage her career." "Can she do that?" "Temporarily. But it's a mistake. Makes her look vindictive, like she's got something to hide." He was right, but that didn't make it less infuriating. I'd spent 8 years building a life with this woman, and she was dismantling it with the same cold efficiency she brought to everything else. "What's our next move?" I asked. "We escalate." The escalation started with the house next door. Mrs. Patterson had been trying to sell for 6 months, ever since her husband died. The asking price was reasonable, the location was perfect, and I had just enough liquid assets to make a cash offer before Vanessa's lawyers could freeze everything. I closed on it Tuesday afternoon. Wednesday morning, I started renovations. The construction crew arrived at 7 a.m. sharp, just as Vanessa was getting ready for another day of damage control at Morrison Financial. The sound of jackhammers and power tools echoed through our formerly quiet neighborhood like a declaration of war. She called me 15 minutes later. "What the hell are you doing?" she screamed over the noise. "Home improvement," I said. "The new place needed some work." "New place? What new place?" The house next door. I'm your new neighbor. Isn't that exciting? The silence that followed was beautiful. I could practically hear her brain processing the implications. You bought the Patterson house? Cash deal. Closed yesterday. I'm thinking of turning it into a party house. You know, loud music, late nights, lots of young people having fun. Really embrace the bachelor lifestyle. David, you can't. Can't what? Live in a house I legally own? I'm pretty sure that's still legal in this state. She hung up, but the damage was done. By noon, she'd called the police to complain about noise violations. By evening, she'd contacted a real estate lawyer about nuisance laws, but I was just getting started. The parties began that weekend. Tommy helped me organize them, reaching out to every 20-something he knew who liked free beer and loud music. College kids mostly, but also young professionals and anyone else who wanted to blow off steam in a suburban setting. The first party was modest. Maybe 30 people, music that stopped at midnight, cleanup that finished by 2 a.m. Perfectly legal, completely within noise ordinances, and absolutely infuriating to my soon-to-be ex-wife. I watched from my new kitchen window as she paced around her backyard, cell phone pressed to her ear, probably calling lawyers and city officials and anyone else who might help her shut me down. But I hadn't broken any laws. I was just a divorced man enjoying his freedom. The second party was bigger. 50 people, a DJ, a catered barbecue that lasted until 1 a.m., still legal, still within the bounds of suburban propriety, but pushing the envelope just enough to make Vanessa's life miserable. The third party was when things got interesting. I'd invited everyone from the hotel confrontation. Mike, James, Robert, even Tom, though he'd declined. They brought friends who brought friends, and by Saturday night, I had nearly 100 people in my backyard celebrating the downfall of Morrison Financial. That's when Vanessa made her mistake. She came over around 11 p.m., dressed in a conservative business suit like she was heading to a board meeting instead of a backyard party. The music was loud enough that she had to shout to be heard. "David, we need to talk!" I was holding court near the beer cooler, telling the story of the hotel projector stunt to a group of admirers. When I saw Vanessa approaching, I raised my voice just enough to carry over the music. Well, I said, look who decided to join the party. Everyone, I'd like you to meet my wife. Ex-wife, whatever. The crowd turned to look at her, and I saw her realize what a mistake she'd made. These weren't random college kids. These were people who'd been following the Morrison Financial story. People who recognized her face from the news coverage. "I need to speak with you privately," she said, trying to maintain her composure. "No such thing as privacy anymore," I replied. "Isn't that what you taught me?" "David, please." That's when someone in the crowd started recording. I saw the phone come up, saw the little red light that meant we were being broadcast live to social media. Vanessa saw it too, and her carefully maintained mask finally cracked. "Turn that off," she demanded. "It's a public space," the kid with the phone said. "I can record whatever I want." "This is maltreatment." "This is accountability," I corrected. "Something you might want to look into." She turned back to me, her eyes blazing with fury and desperation. "You're destroying everything I've worked for." "You destroyed it yourself," I said. "I'm just making sure everyone knows about it." That's when she lost it completely. "You pathetic little man!" She screamed, loud enough for the whole party to hear. "You think this makes you important? You think ruining my life makes up for the fact that you were never good enough for me?" The crowd had gone quiet, sensing that they were witnessing something more than just a domestic dispute. Phones were out everywhere now, recording every word. "Never good enough," I said. "You're right. I was never good enough to sell myself for a promotion. I was never good enough to betray the person I promised to love and honor. I was never good enough to destroy other people's lives for money. At least I had ambition. At least I tried to make something of myself instead of hiding behind spreadsheets and investment portfolios." "You made something of yourself, all right. You made yourself into a hooker." The word hung in the air like a slap. Vanessa went pale, then red, then pale again. The crowd was dead silent, waiting to see what would happen next. What happened next was that she threw her drink at me. It was a Cosmopolitan, pink and sticky and probably expensive. It hit me square in the chest, soaking through my shirt and dripping onto the ground. The crowd erupted in cheers and laughter. Someone started a slow clap. The kid with the phone was grinning like he'd just won the lottery. I looked down at my ruined shirt, then back at Vanessa. "Feel better?" I asked. "Go to hell," she said, and stalked away. But the damage was done. By Sunday morning, The video had gone viral. #Cosmogate was trending on social media, complete with remixes, memes, and commentary from people who'd never heard of Morrison Financial, but loved a good public meltdown. Vanessa's carefully crafted image as the wronged wife was in ruins. The narrative had shifted, and she was no longer the sufferer of an unstable ex-husband. She was the cheating wife who'd been caught and was lashing out at the man who'd exposed her. That's when Tommy called with news that changed everything. "We've got a problem," he said. "Remember Patricia Vance? The puppet master. What about her?" "She's not going down quietly. Word is she's got insurance policies on everyone involved, including your wife. Photos, recordings, financial records. She's planning to trade them for immunity." I felt my stomach drop. What kind of photos? The kind that would destroy what's left of Vanessa's reputation, and yours by extension. How is that possible? I wasn't involved in any of this. You're married to her. In the court of public opinion, that makes you complicit. I stared out the window at the house where I'd spent 8 years of my life, where I'd built dreams that were now turning into nightmares. What do? We get to Patricia before she gets to the prosecutors. How? Tommy's voice carried a grim satisfaction. We make her an offer she can't refuse. The meeting was set for Thursday night at a warehouse in the industrial district, the kind of place where bad decisions go to die. Tommy had arranged it through intermediaries, people who knew Patricia Vance. I arrived first, parking my car in the shadows between 2 abandoned buildings. The Bentley looked out of place in the urban decay, like a diamond in a garbage dump. Tommy showed up 5 minutes later, followed by a black sedan that looked like it belonged to either federal agents or high-end criminals. In this case, it was carrying Patricia Vance. She stepped out of the car like she was attending a board meeting instead of a clandestine negotiation in an abandoned warehouse. Even in the dim lighting, she looked polished and professional, the kind of woman who could convince you that black was white and make you thank her for the privilege. "Mr. Morrison," she said, extending her hand, "I have to say I'm impressed. Most men in your position would have just hired a divorce lawyer and called it a day. I'm not most men." "No, you're not." She smiled, and it was like looking at a shark. "You're the man who destroyed my life's work for the sake of petty revenge. I exposed criminal activity. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Because from where I'm standing, you look like a bitter husband who couldn't handle his wife's success." Tommy stepped forward. "Let's cut to the chase. What do you want?" Patricia opened her briefcase and pulled out a tablet. The screen showed a photo that made my blood run cold. It was Vanessa, but not the way I'd ever seen her. She was in a hotel room with Richard Hartwell and 2 other men I didn't recognize. The photo was explicit, degrading, and clearly taken without her knowledge. "I have dozens of these," Patricia said. "Photos, videos, audio recordings. Your wife wasn't just sleeping with clients, Mr. Morrison. She was performing for them. And I documented everything." I stared at the image, feeling sick. Whatever Vanessa had done, she didn't deserve this. "What do you want?" I asked. "Immunity? A clean exit? And enough money to disappear somewhere warm and extradition-free. In exchange for?" "The photos disappear, the recordings get deleted, your wife's reputation stays intact, or what's left of it." Tommy and I exchanged a look. This was blackmail, pure and simple. But it was also the only way to protect Vanessa from complete destruction. "How much?" I asked. $2 million, cash, untraceable? That's a lot of money. It's a bargain. These photos are worth 10 times that to the right tabloid. I looked at the tablet again, at the woman who'd been my wife reduced to a commodity in someone else's power game. "I need time to think about it." "You have 24 hours, Patricia said. After that, I start shopping around." She got back in her car and drove away, leaving Tommy and me alone in the warehouse with the weight of an impossible decision. "What are you thinking?" Tommy asked. "I'm thinking," I said slowly, "that Patricia Vance just made a very big mistake." "What kind of mistake?" I smiled, and it felt like ice forming in my veins. "She assumed I still care what happens to my wife." I had the money. That was the hell of it. $2 million in liquid assets, sitting in accounts that Vanessa's lawyers hadn't found yet. Money I'd made from shorting Morrison Financial stock and investing in their competitors. Blood money earned from the destruction of my own marriage. I could have paid Patricia Vance, could have made the photos disappear, protected what was left of Vanessa's reputation, and walked away clean. Instead, I called the FBI. Special Agent Jennifer Torres met me at a coffee shop downtown, the kind of place where federal agents blend in with lawyers and accountants and other people who make their living from other people's misery. Mr. Morrison, she said, settling into the booth across from me. I understand you have information about the Morrison financial case. I have something better than information, I said, sliding a flash drive across the table. I have evidence. The drive contained everything James had pulled from Morrison's servers, plus the recordings Tommy had made of Patricia's blackmail attempt. Enough evidence to put her away for 20 years, assuming she didn't disappear to a non-extradition country first. This is very helpful, Agent Torres said after reviewing the files, but we're going to need your cooperation to make it stick. What kind of cooperation? The kind where you wear a wire to your next meeting with Miss Vance? I thought about Vanessa, about the photos Patricia was threatening to release, about the woman I'd married and the stranger she'd become. When do we do this? I asked. The second meeting was set for the same warehouse, but this time I wasn't alone. Agent Torres and her team were positioned around the building, listening to every word through the wire taped to my chest. Patricia arrived right on time, still playing the role of the successful businesswoman, even though her world was collapsing around her. Do you have my money? She asked. I have a counteroffer, I said. Her smile faltered. I don't think you understand the situation, Mr. Morrison. I'm not negotiating. Neither am I. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. It was a news article from that afternoon announcing that the FBI had opened a criminal investigation into Morrison Financial's client relations program. Patricia's face went white. You son of a witch, she whispered. You made one mistake, I said. You assumed I still cared about protecting my wife. Those photos will destroy her. She destroyed herself. I'm just making sure you go down with her. That's when Patricia made her own mistake. She reached into her purse, and for a moment, I thought she was going for a weapon. Instead, she pulled out her phone. If I'm going down, she said, I'm taking everyone with me. She started typing, probably uploading the photos to some cloud server or sending them to a tabloid contact. But Agent Torres and her team were already moving. FBI, drop the phone. Patricia looked up to see federal agents emerging from the shadows, weapons drawn, surrounding her on all sides. Her phone clattered to the concrete floor. Patricia Vance, you're under arrest for extortion, racketeering, and conspiracy to commit securities fraud. They cuffed her right there in the warehouse, reading her rights while she stared at me with pure hatred. You think this makes you the hero? She said as they led her away. You're just as guilty as the rest of us. Maybe she was right, but I was the one walking away free. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Morrison Financial collapsed within a week, taking down Richard Hartwell and half a dozen other executives. The photos Patricia had threatened to release were seized as evidence and sealed by court order. Vanessa's career was finished, but her reputation survived mostly intact. She was portrayed in the media as another sufferer of Patricia's scheme, a naive woman who'd been manipulated by a criminal mastermind. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday in October. We met in a conference room downtown, surrounded by lawyers and paperwork and the debris of 8 years of marriage. Vanessa looked older than I remembered, worn down by months of legal battles and public scrutiny. But she was still beautiful, still the woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. I'm sorry, she said as we signed the final papers, for all of it. I know, I said. Do you hate me? I thought about it for a moment, really considered the question. No, I said finally. I don't hate you. I just don't know you anymore. She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. What will you do now? She asked. I don't know. Travel maybe. Figure out who I am when I'm not married to you? I'm moving to Seattle, starting over. Good luck. You too. We shook hands like business partners closing a deal, and then it was over. 8 years of marriage reduced to signatures on legal documents. I walked out of that conference room a free man, but freedom felt heavier than I'd expected. The house, both houses actually, sold quickly. I kept the Bentley and bought a small apartment downtown, the kind of place where you could disappear if you wanted to. Tommy stopped by on moving day, bringing beer and unsolicited advice. So, what's next? He asked, settling onto my new couch. I'm thinking about writing a book, I said. About what? About how to destroy your life and everyone else's in 5 easy steps? He laughed, but it didn't sound particularly amused. You know, he said, most people would call this a victory. Most people would be wrong. You got your revenge. You exposed the truth. You came out ahead financially, and I lost everything that mattered. Tommy was quiet for a moment, drinking his beer and studying my face. Do you regret it? He asked finally. I thought about Vanessa in that hotel room, about the photos Patricia had threatened to release, about the woman I'd married becoming someone I didn't recognize. No, I said, I don't regret it, but I don't feel good about it either. That's the difference between justice and revenge, Tommy said. Justice feels righteous. Revenge just feels empty. He was right, of course, but empty was better than humiliated. Empty was better than being the fool who never saw it coming. 3 months later, I was in a bar in Key West when I saw the news report. Patricia Vance had been sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Richard Hartwell got 12. Morrison Financial's other executives received various terms depending on their level of involvement. Vanessa wasn't mentioned in the report. She disappeared into her new life in Seattle, probably working under a different name, trying to rebuild what I'd helped destroy. I raised my glass to the television screen. To new beginnings, I said to no one in particular. The bartender looked at me like I was just another drunk tourist talking to himself. Maybe I was, but I was a drunk tourist who'd won, who'd taken on the system that had betrayed me and come out on top, who'd proven that sometimes the little guy could fight back and win. It should have felt better than it did. I finished my drink and walked out into the Florida sunshine, thinking about the book I was going to write, about the lessons I'd learned and the prices I'd paid, about the difference between justice and revenge, and why sometimes that difference doesn't matter as much as you think it should. The phone in my pocket buzzed, a text from an unknown number. I saw the news about Patricia. I hope you're satisfied. V. I stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it without responding. Some conversations were better left unfinished. I walked down to the marina and bought a ticket for the sunset cruise, surrounded by tourists and honeymooners and people who still believed in happy endings. The boat pulled away from the dock as the sun started to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Someone behind me was taking pictures, trying to capture the moment for posterity. I didn't take any pictures. I just watched the sun disappear into the Gulf of Mexico, thinking about endings and beginnings and the space between justice and revenge. When the cruise was over, I went back to my hotel room and started writing. Chapter 1. How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Destruction. It seemed like a good place to start. 6 months later, the book was finished. Dirty Secrets, a memoir of marriage, betrayal, and revenge, hit the bestseller list 3 weeks after publication. The movie rights sold for 7 figures. Vanessa never contacted me about it, though I'm sure she read it. Everyone did. I used the money to buy a house in the mountains of Colorado, far from the suburban battlefield where my marriage had died. I write books now, mostly fiction, though people always ask if the stories are based on real events. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they're just stories. The difference doesn't matter as much as you might think. I never remarried, never even came close. Some people are meant for partnership, for building lives together and growing old with someone who knows all their secrets. I'm not one of those people anymore. But I'm not bitter about it. Bitterness is just another kind of prison, and I've had enough of those to last a lifetime. Sometimes late at night when the mountain air is thin and cold, I think about the man I used to be. The one who believed in love and trust, and the possibility of happily ever after. I don't miss him exactly, but I remember him fondly, the way you might remember a favorite pet from childhood. He was naive and trusting and ultimately doomed. But he was also capable of love in a way that I'm not anymore. That's the real price of revenge, I think. Not the money, or the time, or the relationships you destroy along the way. It's the part of yourself that you have to eliminate to see it through. But sometimes that's a price worth paying. Sometimes becoming the villain is the only way to win. They said I'd regret becoming the villain, but I wore it better than any of them ever wore their masks.